Okay, I will be honest. After fucking doing this thing, I'm not doing it in the sliding. The sliding, though pretty, I can't do it, man. I'm too fucking scared. Yo, that's a lot better for my scared self. So, hi guys. How are you doing today? My name is Brendan Bromley, and I haven't done one of these in a while. Just, standard sit-down review. And out of any movie I've ever wanted to talk about, in terms of just sitting down and a movie I can't shut up about, trust me, my friends know this to be true, and it's 1977's Italian masterpiece, Dario Argento's Suspiria. Dario Argento's Suspiria was released in 1977 and stars Jessica Harper as Susie Banyan, an American ballet student from New York, traveling all the way to Friedberg, Germany, to go ahead and go to the Tanz Academy, which just so happens to be this prestigious ballet academy run by a coven of motherfucking witches. And to this day, this movie, I think, is the scariest depiction of A, witches I've ever seen, B, color, C, probably the scariest soundtrack I've ever heard, and just overall, this is one of the scariest movies I think I've ever seen. Now, let me just say something right away, is that I understand that this movie has an acquired taste. I do know people who don't like this movie or aren't even remotely afraid by it. And that comes down to one thing, and that is if you find music scary. That's if you find music scary, that's if you feel like color scary. If you're frightened by realistic stuff, this movie might not be for you. But this movie, for me, terrifies me on a very, very deep level. This was one of the first movies I ever saw when I was a kid that terrified me. I saw this movie first when I was 10 years old, and I remember very faintly watching this movie and going home that night, not being able to sleep. I cried. This movie scared me so bad as a 10-year-old. That was my fault, obviously. Obviously this movie is definitely a lot more scary to a child than it is maybe, a grown adult. But still to this day, this movie holds a very, very creepy feel to me. And it brings back all those old feelings that I had way back when I was a kid. That has everything to do with the tremendous direction of Dario Argento, the colors that give this movie a completely nightmarish feel, and the soundtrack that makes you feel like you're trapped in this overly fucked haunted house. The soundtrack by Goblin was so good that it helped to inspire John Carpenter when he was making the Halloween soundtrack, which also a lot of people consider to be one of the scariest movie soundtracks ever made. When I listen to the bells, the heavy percussion, the weird strings that go on in the background, and the moaning, groaning, and even the whispering from the band Goblin, I'm telling you right now, the soundtrack is masterful. And every time I listen to it, it does send chills down my spine. Horror is often a subjective genre. And with me, I'm just going to be honest, Suspiria is probably my favorite horror movie ever made. I've seen some that are so good, and seen some where the acting is more consistent, the writing is more consistent, maybe the cinematography might even just be a little bit better, but that doesn't matter. This movie's attributes and the way that it provokes a feeling out of me is unprecedented. And I love every fucking bit of this movie. This movie is not only a subjective choice as being one of my favorite horror movies, it's also very well known amongst fans of the genre and critics alike that this is one of the best horror movies ever made. It goes without saying. The direction of this movie is phenomenal. The biggest thing with this movie that gets most people is the violence in this movie. The violence in this movie is so over the top, and the blood so vividly red and pink that it sets that feeling inside of you where you're like, I don't even know what I'm watching anymore. This feels so weird. And I'm telling you, the violence in this movie is absolutely insane. insane. What if I told you guys that in the first 15 minutes of this movie, a woman who's running away from the Tan's Academy, who finds out that, you know, there's a coven of witches running the damn place. She goes to her friend's apartment, right? She gets dragged out of her window after being smashed right through it, and gets dragged out of that window, thrown onto this roof, and stabbed so many times in the chest to a point where the skin that's covering over her heart just falls out and gets stabbed directly into the heart. Right after that, wires wrapped around her, and her head is smashed through this glass pane while her friend is downstairs screaming for help. Her head is smashed through, and then before you know it, the whole body falls through the glass ceiling, and the ceiling comes down, and the glass panels land on her friend, cutting her head in half, metal framework going through her neck and through her like pelvic area. What the fuck? Me as a 10-year-old was beyond terrified when I saw this movie. And to this very day, that kind of violence still does get to me. A blind man who gets his fucking throat bitten out by his own seeing eye dog. A girl jumping into a pit of barbed wire. And then we got the witch herself who gets stabbed through the fucking neck after those first... Just... This movie is beyond fucking awesome. And has some incredible special effects. At the end of the day, Suspiria is one of my favorite horror movies, if not my favorite horror movie ever made. It is incredibly horrifying and incredibly just vivid in my mind that there's no other movie that could ever replace this movie as one of my favorite horror movies ever made. And for it, Suspiria does get 10 out of 10. With great cinematography, great direction, fun acting, gory effects, one of the scariest soundtracks I've ever heard in my whole life. Suspiria still holds up to this very day. Obviously, if you guys aren't into that stuff, I get it. There are plenty of people that I know who just are not into, you know, that kind of horror. But me, I always keep coming back for more. Oh, also, one more thing. Yes, I know I just talked about the original, but I'm going to talk about the remake in a video analysis form. And then after that, I'll probably cut off on the video analysis for a while, but happy 31 days of horror. Halloween's coming up. Have a spooky season, everybody. And I hope everybody has a great day, evening, night, whatever the fuck time you guys are watching this. See you all next time.